You ever notice how silence speaks louder than words? See, when you stop calling, texting, or checking in on a man, suddenly everything shifts. He starts to wonder. He starts to question. And for the first time, he feels the weight of your absence. That's not weakness. That's power. And today, I'm going to break down exactly what happens when you stop contacting a man and why sometimes your silence is the loudest message you'll ever send. When you stop contacting a man, the very first thing that happens is subtle but powerful. He realizes the comfort he lost. See, most men don't even notice how much consistency and reassurance you provide until it's gone. When you're calling, when you're texting, when you're checking in, it becomes routine to him. It blends into the background like air conditioning. You don't notice it until the room gets hot. And the moment you pull back, the moment you stop reaching out, that silence hits him in a way he wasn't expecting. He starts to feel that absence. He starts to notice how much lighter, calmer, and more secure life felt when you were there providing that energy. It's human nature to get comfortable with the things that come easy. When someone is always available, always ready with a text or a call, it's easy to treat that like it'll last forever. But when that comfort disappears, suddenly it's glaringly obvious. He may not admit it at first. He may not even fully understand why something feels off in his day. But deep down, he knows it's because you're no longer in his pocket, no longer in his notifications, no longer right there smoothing over the silence. And that void starts to nag at him. Now, here's the important part. That realization doesn't come because you begged him to see your value. It doesn't come because you reminded him over and over how much effort you put in. It comes when you remove yourself from the equation. Silence forces awareness in a way words never can. By stepping back, you give him the chance to see what you actually contributed. The good mornings, the check-ins, the how was your day, texts. Those things aren't just little messages. They're touch points of care, small but steady signals that someone was in his corner. When those touch points vanish, he's left with a kind of emptiness. And here's where men often get caught off guard. They think they can handle it. They tell themselves, I'm fine, I don't need that attention. But over time, the reality sets in, the silence grows heavier, and the comfort you provided starts to look more valuable. Because consistency is rare, loyalty is rare, and when you've been giving that without hesitation, he starts to notice how hard it is to replace. He realizes it wasn't just casual texting. It was an emotional anchor, something that made his world feel a little steadier. That's why your silence is powerful. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It simply exists, and in that existence, it makes him confront the fact that he lost something good, and whether his pride wants to admit it or not, he knows the truth, the comfort he once felt came from you. The connection, the steady presence, the safe space, that was you. And it's in that realization that the balance begins to shift. He starts to weigh what he had against what he has now. He starts to question why he didn't appreciate it when it was right in front of him. And maybe for the first time, he starts to think about what it would take to earn it back. Silence may not say much, but it makes him hear everything he's been ignoring. When you stop contacting a man, something else begins to happen almost immediately. His ego gets tested. You see, men are wired to feel a sense of control when they believe they are the center of attention, the one being pursued, the one being relied upon. When you are always reaching out, always initiating contact, it gives him a sense of security, a sense that he is in charge of the relationship. But the moment you pull back, the dynamic shifts in a way he isn't fully prepared for. Suddenly, he no longer has the certainty he's been taking for granted. And that uncertainty begins to poke at his pride in ways that are subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but deeply felt. Ego is a tricky thing. It isn't always about arrogance. It's about identity, about perception, about how a man sees himself in relation to the people around him. When he stops receiving your calls, your texts, your attention, he starts to feel like he's losing ground. And that feeling isn't just emotional, it's physical. There's a tension, a restlessness that creeps in because for the first time, he's being forced to question something he assumed was guaranteed. He starts to wonder if you've moved on, if someone else has your attention, if perhaps he didn't do enough to keep you engaged. That's when the ego begins to stir. Now, this isn't about manipulating him or playing games. It's about the natural effect of absence. Men often don't realize how much they rely on your energy to feel competent, to feel validated. When that energy is removed, even for a short while, it's like taking the rug out from under their feet. Suddenly, they're left facing a reflection of themselves, one they may not have wanted to see. Questions start to emerge. Did I push too hard? Was I taking her for granted? Is she really okay without me? Those questions may linger quietly at first, but they grow louder with every day of silence. This testing of the ego also brings clarity. When he realizes you're not there to constantly reassure him, he begins to understand the value of what you bring. That daily attention, that consistent care, that effort to connect, it wasn't just habitual, it was meaningful. And when it's gone, he can't hide behind distraction anymore. He has to face it. He has to confront the reality that he may have underestimated you. At the same time, this challenge to his ego can spark a kind of transformation. Men don't always admit it, but they respond to challenges. They rise to tests, especially when those tests are subtle and require reflection rather than confrontation. By stepping back, you're giving him the space to assess himself, to realize the role he played in taking your presence for granted, and to consider how he might step up. And that's a very different, much deeper motivation than any reminder or confrontation could ever achieve. Your silence, in this sense, is not cold, it's purposeful. It's a statement without words. It communicates that you value yourself enough not to chase, that you understand your own worth, and that you won't allow your energy to be wasted. And when a man experiences that absence, when his ego is quietly tested, he starts to appreciate what he had and what he stands to lose. Ego may be subtle, it may be prideful, but it's deeply human. And when it's tested the right way, it opens a door for him to reflect, and ultimately to recognize the value of what he almost let slip away. Sometimes, the quietest moves make the loudest impact. When you stop contacting a man, one of the most fascinating things that happens is that the chase gets reignited. You see, men are naturally wired to pursue, to feel the thrill of earning something that isn't immediately available. It's not a trick or a game, it's biology, psychology, and instinct all rolled into one. When you're always reaching out, always sending that text, always calling first, the excitement of pursuit fades. It becomes routine. There's no challenge, no spark, no need to prove anything. But the moment you pull back, the dynamic flips. Suddenly, he's chasing something that's no longer within easy reach, and that changes everything. The chase isn't just about desire, it's about investment. When a man feels that he has to work a little to regain your attention, he begins to think more deeply about you, about the time you've spent together, about the energy you've given him. He starts replaying moments in his mind, remembering the laughs, the support, the connection, and it all begins to feel more precious. That urgency, that fire that comes from wanting something he can't immediately have, awakens a part of him that had grown complacent. And it's important to understand why this works. Men are often more motivated by challenge than by certainty. When you are constantly available, when you're always just a text away, it's easy for him to take that for granted. He knows it's there, so the value diminishes. But when you stop reaching out, when you create space, you create a subtle tension. That tension makes him feel the loss of your attention and compels him to act. It's a natural response. He wants what he can't easily have, and your absence makes him realize just how much he wants it. This reignited chase also brings clarity. When he is the one making the effort, when he is the one reaching out, he begins to see the relationship through a different lens. He notices the small details he may have overlooked before. The way you smile, the way you support him, the moments of connection he had been taking for granted. The effort he puts in forces him to value what he is pursuing. Suddenly, every call he makes, every message he sends, carries meaning. Every interaction becomes intentional, and the connection deepens in ways that casual, one-sided contact never could achieve. And here's the key: the chase isn't about manipulation, it's about balance. By stepping back, you're not playing games, you're giving him the chance to invest emotionally, to show up, and to recognize your worth. You're reminding him that relationships are reciprocal, that connection is earned, and that your time and energy are valuable. That realization shifts the dynamic. It makes him more present, more attentive, and more engaged, because now he understands that he can't take your presence for granted. The beauty of this process is that it awakens his awareness. He starts to notice patterns in his own behavior, to reflect on how he's treated you, and to consider what he truly wants. And when he reaches out, when he puts in the effort, it's no longer just about routine. It's about genuine desire, respect, and appreciation. The chase brings intention back into the relationship, and that intention is priceless. Sometimes, stepping back isn't about absence. It's about creating space for him to step forward. And when that happens, the connection transforms into something stronger, deeper, and far more meaningful than it ever was before. The chase isn't lost. It's simply waiting for him to remember how much it matters. When you stop contacting a man, something profound begins to happen. He starts reflecting on his own behavior. You see, when you are always present, always responding, always available, it's easy for him to drift through the relationship on autopilot. He doesn't have to pause and think about what he's doing right or wrong, because your presence smooths over everything. But when you pull back, when your voice, your messages, and your attention are no longer there, he is forced to confront himself. Suddenly, the quiet space you create becomes a mirror, reflecting his choices, his actions, and his patterns back at him in ways he can no longer ignore. This reflection isn't always immediate, and it may not be comfortable. At first, he may try to rationalize your absence. He might think, "She's busy," or "It's nothing, she'll reach out later." But as the days stretch on and the silence continues, those excuses begin to crumble. In the absence of your reassurance, he has no choice but to look inward and ask himself questions he may have been avoiding. Did he take you for granted? Did he fail to prioritize you? Did he truly appreciate the effort, care, and consistency you brought into his life? The very act of stepping back forces him into self-examination, whether he wants it or not. And here's the subtle power of this reflection. When a man begins to think about his behavior, he also starts to recognize the consequences of it. He starts to see patterns he hadn't noticed before, moments when he brushed off your feelings, failed to notice your needs, or assumed that your presence would always be there. That awareness is important because it allows him to see the relationship from a new perspective, one where he is accountable for his actions. Your silence becomes a tool that highlights not just what he may have done wrong, but also what he stands to lose if he doesn't change. The process of reflection also awakens his emotional depth. Men are often taught to suppress or ignore feelings, to focus on solutions rather than emotions. But when you step back, when the noise of constant interaction is removed, he has to sit with his feelings. He begins to confront the discomfort of missing you, the longing for your presence, and the realization that perhaps he didn't give as much as he received. That discomfort is not punishment, it's growth. It's a chance for him to understand the value of what he has and the impact of what he may have overlooked. Reflection also leads to choice. Once he recognizes his behavior and feels the absence of your energy, he begins to consider his next steps. Will he continue to let things slide, or will he rise to the occasion? Will he put in the effort to show appreciation, to communicate better, and to respect your presence, or will he accept that the opportunity may be slipping away? By stepping back, you give him the chance to choose intentionally, to act with awareness, rather than simply drifting along in the comfort of routine. And the remarkable thing is that this reflection is often deeper than anything words could achieve. You don't have to lecture, confront, or demand attention. Your absence speaks volumes, forcing him to evaluate himself, his actions, and the value of the relationship. It's quiet, but it's profound. When a man begins to reflect, he begins to understand not just who you are, but also who he is in relation to you, and that realization can be transformative. Self-awareness, once sparked, can never be ignored. When you stop contacting a man, one of the most powerful things that happens is that you regain your emotional power. You see, in relationships, it's easy to lose yourself when you're always the one initiating, always reaching out, always trying to make sure he feels secure. Over time, that constant giving can shift the balance, leaving you feeling drained, overlooked, and even undervalued. But when you take a step back, when you stop chasing, when you allow yourself to pause and focus on your own energy and priorities, something shifts, not just in him, but in you. You start reclaiming the power that was quietly slipping away. Emotional power isn't about manipulation, and it's not about games. It's about boundaries. It's about understanding that your attention, your energy, and your presence are valuable, and that they should not be taken for granted. When you are always available, it's easy for him to become complacent. He knows you'll be there, so he doesn't have to act, doesn't have to step up, and doesn't have to recognize the effort you've been putting in. But when you remove yourself from that constant cycle, you create a space where he begins to realize what it means to be without you, and at the same time, you remind yourself of your own value. The beauty of regaining emotional power lies in the clarity it brings. When you're no longer entangled in constant messaging, in always trying to please or be available, you have the mental and emotional space to reflect on what you truly want, what you deserve, and what you will no longer compromise. You start setting standards, consciously or unconsciously, and that sets the tone for how he will perceive you going forward. He begins to see that you are not someone who can be taken for granted, and you start to feel the strength that comes from honoring yourself. This power also shifts the dynamic between you. When you are no longer the constant presence, he is the one feeling the absence, the one sensing that something is missing. That absence, combined with the boundary you've established, communicates a quiet but undeniable message. Your time and energy are not unlimited, and they are not to be wasted. This shift can create a sense of respect, a recognition that your presence is not a guarantee but a choice, and that choice is yours to make. Regaining emotional power also allows you to observe the relationship with a new perspective. You are no longer acting from need, from fear of losing him, or from habit. You are observing, reflecting, and engaging intentionally. You notice how he responds to your absence, and you gain insight into his character, his priorities, and his commitment. This awareness is incredibly empowering because it removes the anxiety and uncertainty that often comes from constantly initiating contact. You are no longer waiting for validation. You are living in your own emotional strength. And here's the most important part. The moment you reclaim your emotional power, you stop giving away control over your feelings and your energy. You are no longer dependent on his actions to feel secure, appreciated, or valued. That shift transforms not just the relationship, but how he experiences you. He starts to respect your presence, to recognize the value of your attention, and to understand that if he wants to keep you close, he must act with intention and care. Stepping back isn't about pushing him away. It's about drawing the line, centering yourself, and remembering that your emotional well-being is yours first. When you claim that power, everything else falls into place. Power is quiet, yet undeniable. When you stop contacting a man, one of the most significant realizations that begins to take shape is that distance has consequences. You see, in most relationships, it's easy to forget that your presence is not a guarantee. When you are always available, always responding, always showing up, it can become too comfortable for him. He begins to assume that you will always be there, no matter what. But the moment you step back, even just a little, the dynamic changes entirely. Distance, even quiet and subtle, forces him to confront the reality that your energy, your time, and your attention are finite, and that if he doesn't act with care and intention, he risks losing something invaluable. This understanding of consequences is both subtle and profound. Men are often challenged not by words, but by absence. When you stop initiating contact, when you stop giving him constant access to your presence, he begins to notice the gap. It might start as a small, nagging feeling. He notices he hasn't heard from you, or he feels that little emptiness in his day, but over time it grows. That void pushes him to think, to feel, to evaluate what he's doing and what he's willing to do to maintain the connection. It's a wake-up call disguised as quiet. And here's where the power of distance becomes truly transformative. He starts to see that relationships are not one-sided. He begins to understand that your attention, your care, and your love are not infinite resources. They are gifts, and like all gifts, they carry weight. When he realizes that his actions, or his lack of them, can impact whether those gifts remain in his life, he starts to pay closer attention. He starts to measure his efforts, to consider how he treats you, and to recognize that complacency has real consequences. Distance also awakens accountability. When you are always there, he may unconsciously rely on your presence to smooth over mistakes or fill emotional gaps. But when you step back, he can no longer hide behind your consistency. He has to face the reality of his own choices. That reflection can be uncomfortable, even unsettling, but it's necessary. It forces him to ask the hard questions. Am I valuing her properly? Am I showing up the way she deserves? Am I contributing to the relationship in a meaningful way, or am I letting it slip through my fingers? Those questions don't go away quietly. They demand answers, and that's the consequence of your absence. Moreover, distance teaches respect. When he understands that your energy is not unlimited, he begins to see your presence as something to be cherished, not taken for granted. He starts to act with more intention, with more consideration, and with greater awareness of how his behavior affects the connection. Distance doesn't just reveal the gaps in his attention, it inspires a new level of engagement and thoughtfulness. And the remarkable part is that this realization happens without confrontation. You don't have to argue, explain, or demand acknowledgement. The simple act of stepping back, of giving yourself space, allows him to experience firsthand what it means to risk losing you. It's quiet, yet it speaks volumes. It teaches him that relationships thrive on reciprocity, on effort, and on appreciation, and that failing to recognize these truths has real consequences. Distance is not absence, it is a reminder, a mirror, and a test all at once. And when he begins to understand that missing you has meaning, that your silence carries weight, and that your presence is something he cannot take lightly, he finally learns the lesson that words alone could never teach. Consequences are real, and absence makes them undeniable.